you, Anja. So you're probably used at these kinds of points to see Beatrice up here delivering these kinds of speeches, but you're going to have to bear with me for a little time. But I want to give a huge shout out to our Norwegian hosts here today and the team behind all of this. Maja, Tuva, Anja, Nina, Ove, Nadia, Isak, Matilde, Ida, Andreas, as well as all the volunteers, the real heroes who make this all work. This has been such a fantastic first day, so please let's just give them a big round of applause. I've been to a lot of forums like this, a lot of ICAN gatherings, and I get so motivated when we have the chance to meet in person like this. And this first day has been so special. It's moments like this when the campaign takes a huge stride forward. So let's all be conscious and appreciative that we are, in these days, making history. Please don't doubt the significance of these moments, of days like this. If you've learned something new today, if you've met someone that inspires you, if you've got a new idea for an action that you heard today, if you heard an argument that you can use in your advocacy, if you feel a buzz, if you feel excitement, that's what ICAN feels like. That's what making history feels like before you even know that it's happening. Yes! Yeah. And we have learned a lot today, and we do have a lot to take home with us. Earlier today, you heard from Nina Tannenwald on the nuclear tableau, and I read everything that Nina writes because it's brilliant. We heard about its impact, its relevance today, and how the TPNW is its institutional home. We then heard from some legends who were instrumental in getting the movement to ban nuclear weapons up and going in earnest, from the ICAN side, from the academic side, from the diplomatic side, the Red Cross side, from Magnus, Stefan, Patricia, and Peter, which sounds like a Scandinavian folk band, but they're, in actuality, some of the brains behind the humanitarian initiative and the TPNW. Some of you over lunch probably attended the ICAN Nuclear Ban 101 forum with Nadia Schmidt, another ICAN legend and the heart and brains behind two massive ICAN civil society forums. And she broke down the nuclear weapons issue and what this ICAN thing is all about. We also heard about the devastating nuclear legacy from Alicia, Mary, Alimjan, and Saima. We heard about the ins and outs of nuclear sharing from Maren, Francesco, Alejandra, and Emmeline. I myself was at a mind-bending session with Torbjörn Graf Hugo, which was focused on norms and how we turn the glib criticism that we often get on its head. And then, of course, there was this brilliant session we just heard now with Lisa, Gabs, Franziska, and Florian. And the point is that there's a wealth of knowledge, of expertise, and passion on display here today. What Anja referred to and what we've talked a lot about today, directly or indirectly, is about the nuclear weapon complicit states and their complicity in something called nuclear deterrence. The fundamental craziness behind the management of nuclear weapons and the theory and practice of nuclear deterrence, and I recall Eric Schlosser talking about this at the time when his book Command and Control came out. The fundamental nature and the fundamental crazy about this, and which we're told is so important, so fundamental to strategic stability, is that the theory relies on the fact that the nuclear weapon state has to be 100% ready to use nuclear weapons at any given moment and to actively indicate that they're not bluffing. They intentionally introduce ambiguity to make their threat more credible, because as the theory goes, if the enemy doesn't believe that you're serious about nuclear weapons, then they'll just attack first and annihilate you. That is what deterrence fundamentalists and so-called realists believe. It also relies on the fact that there has to be perfect information at all times. No miscommunication is possible, no mistakes, and also no irrational leaders. For nuclear deterrence to work, all stakeholders must be perceived to act rationally and predictably. But we know that's not how people work, particularly in times of crisis and great international tension. Some argue with a straight face that there are responsible nuclear weapon states, but what is responsible about promoting weapons of mass destruction and threatening to mass murder civilians? Do nuclear weapons keep the peace? History shows that the existence of nuclear weapons has done nothing to prevent the many terrible conflicts since 1945, including acts of aggression against countries with nuclear weapons. In reality, nuclear weapons haven't been used due solely to good luck, which we cannot expect to last forever. In fact, nuclear weapons make conflicts worse. The Russian invasion of Ukraine highlights how a nuclear armed state can threaten to use nuclear weapons to limit the capacity of other states to respond. This is what we call nuclear blackmail. Nuclear weapons are useless for today's threats. They're strategically useless to address the actual security threats facing nations in the 21st century, including climate change, terrorism, pandemics, cyber attacks. We also hear all kinds of things from nuclear weapon complicit states and other deterrence fundamentalists, I like that term, as you can see, to try to undermine the TPNW. They say that the TPNW is incompatible with NATO. But the fact is, there is no legal obstacle for any state to join the TPNW beyond renouncing nuclear weapons. NATO states, NATO as an alliance, has always been comfortable with having different views. Just look at the member states. Politically speaking, this is a very diverse group of countries. Why should it be different when it comes to weapons of mass destruction? Some say that the TPNW plays into the hands of authoritarian states who will never respect international law, and that we disproportionately make it harder for democratic states, the so-called responsible states. But that's not how international norms work. And in any way, in what other issue of international importance, I'm thinking climate change or human rights, do we as civil society allow the quote-unquote worst actors to dictate what is and what isn't possible? We also hear, there are flaws in the TPNW, it's not verifiable, the safeguards are weak. They used to say it was incompatible with the NPT. We don't hear that so much anymore. We can debunk every one of these arguments in turn, and I highly recommend the ICAN website and other resources for that. But what's important to remember is that every one of these arguments is a smokescreen. The main thing to remember here is that the opponents of the progress of nuclear disarmament will throw any argument out there to see what sticks, even if it's just for a little while, until they figure out the next argument. I remember, I think it was in 2016 at the UNGA, an ambassador from the United States, I won't mention him by name, once said that the TPNW will make the use of nuclear weapons more likely. They're really scraping the barrel here. As we've heard today, 2022 was the year that many people realized that the threat of nuclear weapons was back. For those of us working on this issue, this is just what we've been warning about for many years. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, under the threat of nuclear weapons use, people and leaders could no longer pretend that everything is fine. Some people responded to this by calling for more nuclear weapons or more reliance on nuclear weapons, as we heard. But most people were rightly horrified. ICAN's mission has always been clear, but in 2022 and 2023, our work becomes more meaningful. Our work to center the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons, our work to prohibit nuclear weapons, has never been as urgent as it is right now. You often hear, and we of the movement often talk about stigmatizing nuclear weapons and why it's so important, and how the TPNW is a game changer in making it clear that they're abhorrent, illegitimate, and unacceptable weapons. This year we saw how much that message is resonating and the real-life impact it is having in preventing nuclear war. It's easy to feel like international law and forums like the United Nations are unable to have an impact at times like this. But that's far from the truth. As Nina Tannenwald illustrated very well this morning, in 2022, the treaty helped to raise the nuclear taboo and maybe stop Russia from using nuclear weapons. The strong global condemnation of nuclear threats and the use of nuclear weapons we saw this year is based on the new law we achieved with the TPNW. And ICAN's tireless work to advocate, promote, and mobilize our network enabled this progress. Obviously, we are by no means clear of the danger. The risk continues to be very high, and as we've experienced this year, the situation can change very quickly in any of the nuclear-armed states based on the whim of one of their leaders. It does seem bleak at times, right? I feel it. We're seeing more and more countries embracing nuclear weapons, like Belarus, whose dictator, as Gabriela said, that Belarus could host Russian nuclear weapons. And there's also Sweden and Finland, who have now decided that a weapon of mass destruction is the right thing for them, too. In the face of Russia's nuclear blackmail, other nuclear weapon states are desperately trying to cling on to their rationale behind nuclear deterrence, trying both to condemn these nuclear weapons threats and simultaneously condemn and actively try to undermine the treaty that comprehensively prohibits them. But through this, we see hope. And that's not me trying to be cliché. That's what I really believe. In a time where nuclear weapon states are vying for influence all over the world, the TPNW is a buffer. It's a safeguard against further proliferation. Every state that joins the TPNW is another state that reinforces the non-proliferation norm. For all their talk about non-proliferation and the famous cornerstone, the NPT, the nuclear weapon states should be grateful that we are doing this work for them. All the while, they are undermining the NPT with their talk about how central and important nuclear weapons are. Never has our work been more urgent, but ICAN and the global movement to stigmatize, ban, and nuclear weapons has never been stronger. We mentioned this morning, and you've probably heard it throughout today, but 10 years ago this month, right before the first conference on the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons hosted by the Norwegian government, ICAN held its first civil society forum, also co-hosted by ICAN Norway and friends. It was kind of our introduction to the world. Raise your hands if you were at the Oslo Civil Society Forum in 2013 or the government conference in 2013. It's exciting that it's, 10% of the room, right? So many new people here. I was lucky enough to be there too. I just started as an intern at ICAN, at the ICAN office in Geneva, a couple months before. And I was helping with the registration and selling t-shirts, so that's probably how I met a lot of you who were there. Anyway, I was looking at the conference program for that Civil Society Forum, and I want to read a little bit from it. I found it online a couple days ago. First, we had a little thing in there that said, the ICAN effect. And I think we had in subtitles, imperative, like a dictionary definition. The ICAN effect, the sudden realization that banning nuclear weapons is possible. The emancipating human experience of suddenly realizing that the nuclear weapons problem is solvable. So obviously, we're a bit cheeky with that, a bit tongue-in-cheek. But what that comes from is that what we were finding with so many people when we were introducing ourselves and the work that we were doing is that it would take a little while to click what this ICAN and banning nuclear weapons thing was all about. With everyone, we felt this, with civil society and academia, most diplomats, not all. But I think everyone has to have that click moment, right? And if you don't think that you're one of them, if you think that you were behind the ban before it was cool, then I'm sure there's someone out there who remembers when it happens for you. Maybe there are people in this room for whom it hasn't clicked yet, who feel like, yeah, nukes are bad. This is a worthy cause. Nice forum. But it's not going to happen. You'll get there. Whether it be at the forum here today or tomorrow, or a few days or weeks afterwards, you'll get there. Anyway, this is what also was written on the inside cover of the program guide. We're at the beginning of an exciting journey. After decades of inaction, the moment has finally arrived for us to recognize in clear terms that the humanitarian impacts of the use of nuclear weapons are completely unacceptable and unjustifiable. We hope that our actions and voices over the coming days will inspire states to begin the work of outlawing these weapons. We have a lot of work to do, but the end of the journey, the treaty banning nuclear weapons, is well within our grasp. We have a lot of work to do, but the end of the journey, the treaty banning nuclear weapons, is well within our grasp. I'm not saying this to, reflect on past glory, but shit, look how far we've come. 2013, we had the Civil Society Forum. 2014, we got over 220 governments to support the concept of banning nuclear weapons and had the second, even bigger Civil Society Forum in Vienna. 2017, which felt like a hell of a long time in between, the treaty was negotiated. Later that year, the Nobel Peace Prize. In 2021, the treaty entered into force and became international law. Last year, we saw the first meeting of states parties and marked it with another bigger civil society forum. If you think it's going slowly, and if you feel it's going slowly, that's the right feeling. But you might also be missing the forest for the trees. Now we're here, back in Oslo, and I feel that we're at the start of another exciting new journey that is going to fulfill the promise of the TPNW and the potential of ICAN. If I can adapt a bit from the esteemed 2013 ICAN Civil Society Forum Program Guide, we have a lot of work to do, but the end of the journey, the end of nuclear weapons, is well within our grasp. As a campaign, ICAN is constantly evolving. Our strategy, our tactics, our methods, but we hold true to a few things. The humanitarian arguments and the messages of the Hibakusha and the centrality of affected communities worldwide, and that the TPNW is the embodiment of this humanitarian imperative to eliminate nuclear weapons. What we need to be now is we need to be smart. We need to know when and how to take action in every breaking news situation. When news start breaks, for example, we need to be quick out there with our angle. We can't be passive. We cannot afford to lament the fact that the media isn't interested in our arguments. We need to think about why they're not interested in our arguments, how we fine-tune our talking points, and how we get there, how we get them out front of media. We should always tend towards the side of being bold, brash, and proactive. If I've learned anything from TikTok, it seems to be that confidence is infectious. Everyone has a different role to play in this struggle, but in general, civil society is not at its best when it spends too much time doing behind-the-scenes work. There's a time and a place for that in every context, but remember that for us, calling out the obstacle, shining a light on it, is usually better than trying to make a reasoned, sensible argument behind the scenes and hoping that the person on the other side of the table is as committed to this as we are. While we're trying to depoliticize nuclear weapons, and it's important that we do so, we need to be aware that for many, nuclear weapons are fundamentally political. We need to always be on the front foot and always try to set the agenda, rather than just reacting to whatever news comes out or what terrible policy our government is now pursuing. Stockholm Initiative. We need to be diligent and creative about raising funds for our work. This is an incredibly difficult time for activism. Everyone in this room knows that funding is extremely limited for nuclear disarmament, and it's a constant struggle. I know this firsthand at ICAN. Over the years, there were several moments when it wasn't clear how many more months we had. And basically, we put every penny we had into the negotiations and our work there. There's no easy answer to this, but we can't afford to lose good people in this. We have to find ways to keep it going. A bit more tricky, but we need to reframe what security is, and we heard that several times today. In a time when military alliances are trying to emphasize precision, cyber, in a time when you see military alliances trying to talk about how environmentally friendly and sustainable and responsible they are, it should be much harder than it is for them. It should be much harder than it is to make the case that weapons of mass destruction is fundamentally clumsy, imprecise, and with uncontainable, devastating, horrific impacts. We need to remember that we are a coalition. We are a team, and also beyond ICAN. We need to see and emphasize the connections with other issues and constantly bring new voices and perspectives into our campaign. We cannot afford to become insular and satisfied with the work we've already done or the methods that we've already used. We have to challenge the perspectives we hear from the outside, and everyone in this room has heard this. When we try to bring outsiders, people from the outside into our field, and they find nuclear weapons to be a bit messy, a bit too political, an issue of the past. We can't allow that. And finally, and I think, as Bia would have said, it sounds like she's gone, I mean, as Bia says, as Bia would have said, we need to remember to have fun, right? This is hard work. This is mentally and emotionally taxing work. Don't let anyone get away with saying that campaigning and activism isn't real work. I guarantee that we work harder with far less than those in the financial services industry or whatever. We need to stick together, we need to trust each other, and we need to have a lot of fun. And that's a huge part of the story of ICAN. The forces against us are incredibly strong. They can mess with us and try to undermine us in so many ways, and we've seen it time and time again, but it's also in ways that we will never know. But ICAN is in a good place. ICAN is in your hands now. We have a new and exciting generation of campaigners coming through. It might not feel like it if you've just entered the movement, if this is your first ICAN experience, but we're kind of relying on you. And you should feel confidence in that. I've been at ICAN for 10 years now. I'm very lucky to be here. And without a doubt, I would say that this campaign is at its strongest point. And that's not shade on the past, the work we've done in the past. That's just what I feel. We're smarter, we're more creative, we're more diligent, we're more effective than we've ever been. It might not seem like it every day or in times like we're in right now, but we are winning. So don't forget that. Thank you.